Chapter 6. As the door to Simone's compartment opened, his eyes were blasted by an onslaught of light. But he could still make out the face that presented itself in the opening. A surprisingly boyish one, with pale blue eyes framed by straw-colored hair. "Hi there," said Simone. "Allow me to—" Before he could finish, a hand reached in and grabbed him by the front of his tunic. Then it dragged him out of the compartment and left him lying on the deck like a freshly caught fish. Simone looked around and saw that the blonde kid wasn't the only one sharing the cargo hold with him. There were several others, 6 of them altogether, frowning as they regarded him in the twisted shadows of the hanging chains. Except for one guy, a fellow with a long jaw, an ape-like brow ridge, and a collection of scars decorating his face. He wasn't frowning at all. In fact, he seemed amused. Uncomfortably so. But the face that caught Simone's eye, and held it, was Ripley's. As he watched, spellbound, she separated herself from her companions and approached him, finally kneeling in front of him. Ripley, he thought. God damn. It was intoxicating to see her so close, so real. She was even more impressive than he had imagined, even more riveting. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hard and without inflection. He licked his lips. "I wanted to go along with you." Her nostrils flared. "Why?" "Because you're Ellen Ripley," said Simone. "The Ellen Ripley in Morse and the other banned histories, though I can't explain how. And whatever you're up to, it's got to be something important." As she considered him, her head tilting slightly to one side, he had the strangest feeling that she was thinking about eating him. "But that's crazy, isn't it?" "You're holding something back," she decided. "You've got 10 seconds to tell me what it is, or you're leaving." He was about to remind her that they were in space. If he left the ship, he would pop like an overripe zit. Then he realized that was exactly what she had in mind. Simone swallowed. "She won't do it. She's bluffing." He waited the 10 seconds, watching her. Finally, she glanced at the ape man and said, "Get rid of him." "With pleasure," he grated. Simone put up a hand to ward him off, but it didn't do him any good. The bastard was too quick, too strong. He slammed Simone into the bulkhead hard enough to bring the tang of blood to his mouth, then grabbed him by the collar and yanked him in the direction of a waste disposal hatch. It wasn't very big, but it was big enough to accommodate a human being if, like Simone, he wasn't too bulky. Or if he didn't mind getting a layer of skin ripped off. "Wait!" he yelped back at Ripley. "I'll tell you." But she had already turned and started walking away. The others too. Only the blonde kid stood there watching Jonah drag Simone away, and he wasn't making a move to do anything about it. What, you hear me?" Simone bellowed, his voice banging in the confines of the hold. I said, I'll tell you." The ape man chuckled like evil incarnate. "Too late." It was insane. Simone tried to loosen his tormentor's grip, to twist free. It wasn't helping. "I can't die like this," he insisted. "Not after everything I've been through." "God damn it!" he said, his voice thinning to a scream. "I'm a net reporter. I just wanted a freaking story." The admission didn't affect the ape man in the least, but Ripley halted in her tracks and turned around. "You're gonna like it out there," the ape man said gleefully as he pulled Simone along. "For a few seconds anyway." Ripley stopped one of her comrades, the woman in the blue jumpsuit, and said something to her, but Simone couldn't make it out. He was grunting too loudly as he tried to pry his captor's powerful fingers loose. "Ah, watch the pinky," the ape man growled, jerking Simone forward. "Or I swear, you'll be dead before you hit the black." Simone focused on Ripley again. She was looking at him, exchanging comments with her comrade. "Last stop," the ape man said. Still holding Simone by the collar, he used his other hand to poke at the hatch controls. Swiveling so his feet were between him and his tormentor, Simone lashed out with his heel and kicked his captor in the mouth. It didn't seem to faze the ugly bastard in the least. Finishing the hatch control sequence, he got the cover to swivel open. Beyond it was a dark, empty tube. Without warning, the ape man slugged Simone in the face. It took all the fight out of the reporter, left him like a limp bag of bones. The next thing he knew, he was being jammed, face first, into the waste tube. "No!" Simone screamed. He tried to hook his feet around the hatch, but the ape man wasn't having any of it. With one bone-jarring thrust after another, he stuffed the intruder through the opening. "No!" Simone screamed again, his cries muffled by the closeness of the tube. It was hard to breathe, so hard, and the ape man hadn't even locked the door yet. And it would get even harder when the door by Simone's head swung open and he was puffed out into space. He had heard what happened to people out there. The heat leached out of them in a matter of seconds. Their eyes bled, their lungs burst like overripe fruit. Simone didn't want that to happen to him. "Please!" he shrieked, his pulse pounding in his ears so hard it hurt. "I'll do anything! Just please don't make me go out there!" But his cries fell on deaf ears. The ape man began forcing the hatch door closed, despite Simone's efforts to kick it open. "Oh God!" he thought. "It's really happening!" Then he heard someone say, in a clear and distinct voice, "Let him go." The ape man stopped pushing the door closed and said, "Gotta clean my ears out one of these days. For a second there, I thought you said, 'Let him go.'" "I did," came the answer, which Simone now recognized was Ripley's. The ape man let the door to the tube swing open, allowing the reporter a glimpse of the cargo bay. "You cannot be serious," he snarled. "You're gonna let this sneaky scumbag live?" Ripley didn't say anything in response, but then she had already given him an answer. By then, Simone had wriggled out of the tube and was pouring himself onto the deck. He looked at the ape man with trepidation, hoping he would listen to Ripley. The ape man cursed to himself. Then he whirled and grabbed Simone and pulled the reporter's face close to his. So close that Simone could smell the alcohol on his captor's breath. Then the ape man said, "Don't let me catch you underfoot, scumbag. Not even once. because I would like nothing better than to stomp on you till your head pops." "I understand," said Simone, too exhausted to think of anything else. His tormentor glared at him a while longer. Finally, he thrust the reporter away and headed for the exit, muttering, "The crap I have to put up with." Simone watched him go. Then he looked to Ripley, meaning to thank her for her intervention. But she no longer seemed interested in him. With a word to the woman in the blue jumpsuit, she followed the ape-man out of the hold. Swallowing, Simone stared at the woman. To his surprise, she smiled, walked back across the hold, and gave him her hand. "Come on," she said, helping him to his feet. "I'll try to find you a place to sleep." "Easy," said Gogolak, watching the insertion margins represented by the bright red lines on her monitor. "We had some trouble with the inbox last time." "I hear you, ma'am," said the pilot of the ungainly-looking brown supply ship, visible to Gogolak through a nearby observation port. "And I aim to please." At the same time, he slowed the progress of his vessel's extender arm, which was moving the silver-blue cryotube in its grasp closer to the moor of the colony's cargo bay. "Friendly," observed Philippakos. "Isn't he?" He was completing his environmental checks on the other side of the command center, but he had stopped to watch Gogolak accept the tube. "Not that he doesn't trust me," she thought. In all the years she had worked under him, she had never once given him cause for complaint. On the other hand, the bay's receiving unit had malfunctioned the last time, albeit on Saigo's watch, not hers, and compromised a food shipment. And they didn't get food shipments anywhere near as often as they used to, so it would be a while before anyone forgot that incident. Worse, they hadn't had the right parts on hand to repair the unit. "We never do," Gogolak reflected. So it had to be jerry-rigged, which was, no doubt, why Philippakos seemed so concerned. "A lot more friendly than the last couple," she said. "But he still has to put a round peg in a square hole." "With my help, of course." It took two to perform the peculiar tango of supply insertion. And though she hadn't been asked to dance since she was 11, it was a step she was good at. Unlike the one Gogolak had taken that time with Hamilton Cross. But then, she hadn't expected much to come of that relationship. Men liked women who looked nice, and she hardly fit that description. "Rotate 10 degrees clockwise," she told the pilot. "No sooner said than done," he told her. Gogolak couldn't see the guy's face from this angle, but she imagined he was a good old boy with fresh scrubbed cheeks and a brush haircut. Over the years, she had gotten good at imagining men, putting them together from a voice or just a written report. Like Saturia, the guy in Dome's Alpha. All she knew of him was what she heard in his updates, but she imagined him to be darkly complected, cheerful, and generous in his dealings with women. A little generosity goes a long way, Gogolak thought as she watched the pilot make the 10-degree adjustment. A moment later, the tube slipped into the aperture Gogolak had prepared for it. Mission accomplished. "I don't suppose you've got any extra food containers on that rig?" she asked hopefully. "One," said the pilot, releasing his hold on the tube. Unfortunately, it's earmarked for Delta. Sorry about that. No need to be, Gogolak told him. It's not your fault we haven't seen meat in more than a year. A year's a long time, he said, withdrawing his extender arm. I'll put in a good word for you with the brass. They listen to guys like me all the time. Gogolak found herself laughing. Too rare an occurrence. Yes, I'll just bet they do. See you around, ma'am. Reluctant to see the guy go, she watched as he pulled his ship back, wheeled, and then took off. With a sigh, she returned her attention to the cargo bay. Her monitors told her the tube was secure, awaiting human attention. Nice guy, Philippakos observed. He was, Gogolak allowed. Usually, supply runs attracted peculiar people, even more peculiar than the ones who operated botanical colonies. But this one was different. I hope, said Philippakos, that my Angie meets someone like that one day. Not around here she won't, Gogolak reflected. None of us will. Not that it mattered really. She did better with men she could only dream about. Call was lying on the top bunk in the quarters she shared with Ripley and Bolero, propped up on one elbow, when she heard the sound of someone coming down the corridor. As slender as Ripley looked, her muscles alone weighed more than Jonah's whole body, and the sound of her boots striking the deck reflected that fact. Except, of course, when she wanted to move silently. But this wasn't one of those times. Call turned and laid the back of her head on her pillow, facing the image of a female bathing suit model she had downloaded and pasted onto the ceiling. It was the most perfect example of feminine beauty she had ever seen. Even more so than the picture of Betty Grable painted on the Betty's hull. Not that she could ever look that way. But I can dream, can't I? Figuratively at least. Ripley's shadow preceded her into the room. So, she said, taking the only chair in the place and turning it around so that she could straddle it. What did you get? Call glanced at her. You really want to know? Ripley's eyes narrowed. Is that an actual question, or are you just trying to piss me off? Piss you off? Call said without hesitation. Ripley tilted her head a little, her mouth pulling almost imperceptibly at the corners. Feeling taken for granted, are we? A little, yes. No, make that a lot. Sorry, but it's not exactly balloons and birthday candles for any of us. Not in this business. Call knew Ripley wasn't talking about hauling cargo. Still, if you knew what it was like to go in there. Next time I'll attempt to be more sympathetic. So what the hell did you get? The android sighed. With all Ripley could do, it was difficult to think of her in terms of limitations, but she had some big ones. I got it all, Call said, suppressing an urge to pump her fists in the air. Ripley's brows furrowed. All, as in everything? As in, we don't have to sneak into data centers anymore, which, come to think of it, is a good thing in a lot of ways, considering Byzantium will be spreading the word about us. You're sure about this? Pretty much, said Call. I'm still processing. There's a lot to work on, but I ought to have coordinates within the hour. And then we get to work, said Ripley. She took on a faraway look. Hard to believe after all this time. It was a little hard to believe, but Call was ready for it. Big time. Simone wasn't the most popular soul on the Betty, but he managed to find one crewman who wasn't put off by his company. In a way, he said, continuing a monologue he had begun several minutes earlier, I don't mind your not talking much. It's better than the muttered comments I hear from Jonah. In case it's escaped your attention, I'm not on his Christmas list. Crack didn't say anything in response. He just continued dismantling the shock rifle in his hands, one of a dozen he had earlier laid out on the metal table in front of him. Cha-chunk. Simon wondered if the lighting in the ship's armory was always this low. If he were the one taking guns apart and putting them back together, he would have turned the illumination up a little. But it didn't seem to bother Crack. He just went about his appointed task, as uncomplaining as a man could be. Cha-chunk. The reporter in Simone wondered about the guy. Was it that he couldn't talk, or just didn't feel like it? If it was the former, how had he been deprived of speech? And how had he gotten so expert at constructing shock rifles? The military? Crack didn't look the military type, with his long hair and stubbly chin beard. But then, he might not always have looked that way. Things to ponder, Simone thought. But Crack wasn't the main thing on his mind. Tell me, he said, what's going on around here? Seems to me there's a lot of activity, a lot of whispering. Crack kept on doing what he was doing, but he shot the writer a look that indicated he had at least heard the question. Everybody seems excited about something. Not happy exactly, but excited, like something big is going to happen. The blond man turned a metal alloy barrel towards him and blew into its aperture. Then he fit it into the body that went with it. Cha-chunk. My guess, said Simone, is it has something to do with what happened at Byzantium. But I'm at a disadvantage there because I don't know what it was. Cha-chunk. If this was a regular cargo hauler and you and your friends had to leave Byzantium in a hurry, I'd say you stole something. But I can't see the legendary Ellen Ripley running from border station to border station just to steal stuff. Cha-chunk. So, it's more than that. But what? What would a station have that Ripley would want? I'm guessing it's information. Cha-clank. For the first time since Simone entered the room, Crack failed to make a perfect fit. It showed in his expression. That's it, said Simone. Isn't it? You were there after information. And what kind of information would Ripley find valuable? Only one kind, I think. Crack tried to fit the components together again, but this time he was more deliberate, and they came together perfectly. Cha-chunk. Because, said the writer, when you come right down to it, there's really only one thing in which Ripley is interested. And that's the alien species she's been fighting all her life. Crack neither confirmed nor denied it. He just slotted in another component. Cha-chunk. But now that I think about it, said Simone, A border station wouldn't have information on the aliens. At least, not directly. So what kind of indirect information would it have? That was the question. But try as he might, Simone couldn't come up with the answer. And Crack didn't give him any help. He just kept playing with his shock rifles as if they were the only things in his life, the only things that gave him any satisfaction. "Well," said Simone, "nice talking with you." Benedict shaded his eyes from the blaze of naked sunlight as he gave the 20-meter-high mahogany tree the once-over. 126, he counted. 127, 128. Wait, there was one more bundle of splay-fingered green leaves projecting from the side of the mahogany's light grey trunk. 129. Benedict recorded the data on his handheld computer and moved on to the next mahogany tree. Nothing like counting staghorn ferns to spice up your morning, he thought wearily. Unfortunately, his friend Philip was big on maintaining meticulous inventories of the plant life they had in each dome. As if it really matters how many of the little buggers have stuck themselves up there. The ferns weren't even parasites. They just affixed themselves to the bark of their favorite hardwoods and drew their nutrition from the air. Best hangers-on a fellow could ask for. So a few more or less of them shouldn't have made a difference. However, Philip didn't see it that way. Every month, Benedict and a couple of the other botanists had to roam the domes counting this bit of green stuff or that. It was enough to make a fellow insane. Fortunately, there was one saving grace to the job. This, as luck would have it, was the dome where Benedict had found that especially luscious stand of Sinjaba. And as soon as he was done with his inventory taking, he would again seek out the specimen's hallucinogenic goodness. Looking up at the next tree, he pinpointed its location on the computer's Dome 5 grid. Then he continued his staghorn count, starting with the topmost and working his way down. He had added 3 to his total when he heard a huffing sound. Pausing in his chore, he looked around and saw something lurking under a generously proportioned frond. A big black Labrador retriever. The beast was panting as he regarded Benedict, his long pink tongue hanging halfway to the ground. Obviously, he had been running around a bit. His name was Rex. Not a very inspired name, Benedict thought. In fact, it could hardly have been less inspired. But Colin Hamilton Cross, Rex's owner, hadn't been an especially inspirational individual. All Benedict recalled about him were his oddly pear-shaped body and his thick, dark moustache. Hamilton Cross hadn't ever said anything sarcastic or funny, hadn't ever done anything requiring extraordinary insight or courage, or cruelty for that matter. He had just been there, day in and day out, like the decks and the bulkheads. Until one day he was found sprawled in an orange grove, the victim of a massive, entirely unforeseen heart attack. After that, everyone chipped in a little when it came to caring for Rex. But as he didn't really belong to anybody, he was left pretty much on his own. It had been Philip's idea to program the doors so that Rex could wander unfettered from dome to dome, and the dog had rewarded the decision by demonstrating a very undog-like respect for the flora with which he was surrounded. So it worked out for everyone. "Hello, boy," said Benedict, Not because he was especially happy to run into Rex, but because the animal was looking at him so expectantly. "How are tricks?" Rex walked up to Benedict, sat down, and offered his paw. The gesture was Hamilton Cross's legacy, perhaps his only one. Chuckling, Benedict accepted the proffered appendage. "I didn't mean that literally, you know." The dog yipped suddenly, startling the botanist. Then he yipped again. Less than pleased, Benedict launched a kick at Rex, but the dog eluded it. "Dumb shit," he said, not caring how cruel he sounded. "You're going to make me have a heart attack." Then Benedict noted the angle of the dog's gaze and realized Rex wasn't looking at him at all. He was looking past him, at something the botanist couldn't see. Normally, it took a lot to make Benedict move. However, there was something about the intensity of Rex's stare that made the hairs stand up on the back of his neck. Whirling, he saw nothing at all. Just a few heavy leaf-laden branches waving lazily in the periodic man-made breeze. "Idiot," he thought, angry with himself. He hadn't allowed himself to get spooked like that since he was a child. Back on Earth, in the plex where he had grown up, there were things that could harm a person. People who eked out their living preying on the weak and the innocent. But this was as far from Earth as one could get, both literally and figuratively. There was nothing that could hurt Benedict, nothing that could sneak up behind his back. "It's the damned dog," he thought, blaming the incident on the look he saw in Rex's eyes. "He's got to mellow the hell out." Then he got an idea, a wicked one if he said so himself. "My good friend Rex," he said, "let me introduce you to my other good friend. His name is Sinjaba. I think the two of you will get on famously together." Of course, there was the chance that Rex wouldn't like the taste of the leaves. But hell, he seemed to like the taste of everything else people fed him. Only one way to find out, Benedict thought. Ripping off a Sinjaba leaf, he said, "Come here, boy." Dutifully, Rex came closer, and when the botanist offered him the leaf, the dog just as dutifully ate it. Benedict smiled. "There," he said. "Now we're all friends together. Isn't that cozy?" Just then, his comm unit started vibrating in his pocket. No doubt it was Philip trying to get an update on the fern inventory. "I'm busy," Benedict said, letting the unit buzz until it was tired of buzzing. Then he sat down, placed his back against the curving trunk of a palm tree, and waited eagerly for the fun to begin. Call plucked a playing card from her hand and laid it on the table face down. "I'll take one," she said. Jonah looked up at her from beneath his overhanging brow, in the shadow of which his eyes looked like slick black stones. "One?" he echoed in disgust. She returned his scrutiny without expression. "Have you got a hearing problem all of a sudden?" Jonah's lip curled. Then he laid down some cards of his own and said, "Two. And they'd goddamn better be the right two." To Jonah's left, Vriess frowned as he contemplated his hand. Then he frowned some more. "We're growing old here," said Jonah. "It's your legs that are paralyzed, not your brain." "Shut up," said Vriess, still intent on his cards. It's called thinking. Try it sometime. Jonah made a sound of disdain and leaned back in his chair. Yeah, you're thinking. That's a good one. Ripley, who was leaning on the bulkhead and staring out the mess hall's observation port, seemed oblivious to the exchange at the table. But as Cole knew, Ripley was acutely aware of everything, from the musical clink of chains in the cargo bay to the beating of their respective hearts. Meanwhile, Vriess was still weighing his options, at length. Rama's normally composed features looked strained. This, he said, is why we should impose a time limit. Why? Cole asked reasonably. Are you going somewhere? That is not the point, said Rama. We could play 3 hands in the time it takes Vriess to toss out a card. Go play somewhere else then, said Vriess, his expression becoming more and more pained as he studied his hand. Who needs you? Cole and I can take care of the engines, and Crack can walk around with a stick up his ass. We won't even know you're gone. Jonah laughed out loud. It wasn't a pleasant sound by any means. Now that's funny. No, said Rama. It's cruel and insulting. A subtle difference to someone like yourself, perhaps, but a significant one nonetheless. Screw yourself, said Jonah. How's that for being subtle? Rama turned to Cole. Can I appeal to you, at least, for some semblance of a rational perspective? Afraid not, said the android. The engineer nodded. It's all right. I would have been disappointed if you had said otherwise. I'll take 3, Vriess announced triumphantly, and threw that many cards down on the table. The gods are kind, said Rama. He discarded some of his cards as well. I'll also take 3, and I'll do it while I'm still young enough to deal. He was in the process of doing that when Simone walked into the room. Seeing what the others were up to, he didn't say anything. He just folded his arms across his chest and watched. 1 for Cole, said Rama. 2 for Jonah. 3 for Vriess, and 3 for me. Read 'em and weep, compadres. Cole watched her comrades' faces as they checked out their cards. Of course, they knew better than to give anything away. Next, she looked at her own cards. She had gotten a deuce to go with her pairs of 8s and 9s. No help, she thought. Reaching for her stack of old-fashioned ceramic chips, which she had purchased years earlier from a shopping channel, she tossed a few into the pile in the center of the table. 3. Jonah grinned and dug into his own holdings. Tell you what, little girl, I'll see your 3 and raise you 5. And he slid his chips in one at a time. You're bluffing, said Rama. The big man's grin faded a little. I never bluff. Vriess laughed. You always bluff. Jonah's brow lowered. Bet, you little shit. Vriess slid his chips in one at a time as well, in mockery of Jonah. I'll see it, asshole. Suddenly Jonah whirled, his chair crashing to the deck, and grabbed Simone by the front of his shirt. Then he raised him off his feet and slammed him against a bulkhead. What the hell? Simone squealed. Peeking at my cards, Jonah rumbled. Is that what you were doing? Peeking at my goddamn cards! Hey, said Call. Let him go. He was looking at my cards, Jonah growled, as if that were explanation enough. Come on, said Vriess. Give him a break. It's just a game, Rama said. This little creep was looking at my cards, Jonah repeated in a spasm of anger, pushing Simone farther and farther up the bulkhead. Simone began sputtering, and his face turned beet red. It seemed Jonah was cutting off his air supply. Call got up to intervene, as did Rama, but before they could get around the table, Ripley turned from the observation port. Leave him alone, she told Jonah. Jonah turned an angry red eye on her. Why? Why is it so important to you to keep this little son of a bitch around? That's my business, said Ripley. It's our business, Jonah insisted. We're in this together, remember? You're free to leave, she told him. He looked indignant. Are you shitting me? You'd rather have the sneak than me? Ripley looked at Jonah, her features taut with emotion. She didn't say yes, of course, because that would have been the last they saw of him. But she also wasn't giving in when it came to the stowaway. Jonah had to understand part of that. It wasn't in Ripley's nature to give ground. But there was another reason for her orneriness, a reason for which Jonah wasn't aware. All right, he said, the muscles in his jaw rippling. Have it your way. I just hope he doesn't bite us in the ass. Then he stalked off through the open door. Vriess looked around the table, a disgusted look on his face. Three-handed poker? Game's over, said Call, stating the obvious. Brilliant timing, said Rama. He laid his cards down on the table, one at a time. First the 5 of hearts, then the 6, then the 7, 8, and 9. Just brilliant. Sorry, Simone rasped. Rama smiled a thin smile. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault you're a pain in the ass. Call would have rebuked Rama for his remark, except for one thing. He was right. Simone was a pain in the ass. It was only the fact that she was something of a pariah herself that kept her from feeling any resentment towards him.